I think it was about a year into the role. We were putting in place new reporting procedures, training, and the allegations started to come in. And at that point, we realised there'd been quite systemic underreporting. And I became concerned about whether we had the resource in place to tackle the number of allegations that we were getting in. By 13, 14, it was 39, and it increased significantly after that.
You went off maternity leave, and when you came back in 2014, the number of allegations concerning Oxfam staff overseas really escalated, didn't they? So tell us about the sense of scale there.
So when I came back from maternity leave, my maternity cover had been out to a number of countries, including South Sudan, and we'd been doing confidential surveys, about 120 staff, and the results were very, very concerning. We were getting people reporting that they'd either witnessed or experienced rape or attempted rape.
By Oxfam
representatives. And in one country programme, that was 7% of staff were saying that. And across the programmes, so 3 in total, we had about 1 in 10 saying they'd experienced unwanted sexual touching, sexual assault. This was staff on staff. We hadn't even gone out to beneficiaries who were receiving aid from us. I was extremely, extremely concerned by those survey results. And I asked to take that to the leadership team and was offered the opportunity to present that report to the leadership team. And about an hour before I was due to present, I was told I was no longer needed. I was extremely concerned about that. And I wrote to the chief executive to ask why I hadn't had the opportunity to present those findings and the opportunity to discuss the concerns that I had. And the response I had back was that they felt that everything that needed to be said had been said in my report.
In her email to Oxfam's current chief executive, Mark Goldring, at the end of 2014, Helen Evans said, "Having a concern discussed at leadership team with feedback from the chief executive can go a long way to effecting positive change. As the Horn, East and Central Africa report indicates, we are increasingly gathering data that points to a culture of sexual abuse within some Oxfam offices." Mr. Goldring responded, "You are right that this is a serious issue. Leadership team recognised this, but felt that there was nothing as a group that we could actually add to the situation, which was clearly laid out on the paper." And the individual incidents are truly shocking. I mean, I'm thinking of the email that you wrote to your line manager in February 2015, where you talked about 3 new allegations in a single day. Do you remember those allegations?
Yes, very much so. There was one of a woman being coerced to have sex in a humanitarian response by another aid worker.
This was a woman who was receiving Oxfam aid?
Yeah. Another case where a woman had been coerced to have sex in exchange for aid. And another one where it had come to our attention that a member of staff had been struck off for sexual abuse and hadn't disclosed that. And we were then concerned about what he might be doing. And that was, 3 allegations in one day.
Ms. Evans raised concerns about the lack of resources Oxfam was putting into safeguarding. In February 2015, she warned that Oxfam's failure to resource its safeguarding function is a failure to protect its beneficiaries and young volunteers. If we don't have resource to safeguard those we are meant to help from harm caused by our own representatives, then how can we justify the work we do? The Deputy Chief Executive responded, pledging to carry out a strategic review of Oxfam's approach to safeguarding as soon as was practicable. In your emails, you repeatedly make the case that you, on your own, couldn't deal with the scale of the allegations. You needed more resources. How did Oxfam respond to that?
Yeah, so it was me initially working on this 4 days a week, and then I had 3 days a week of admin support. And I asked repeatedly, we need more resource for this. And it wasn't forthcoming. And it was just a continual fight to try and get more resource. And I just found that so frustrating. because I felt that our failure to adequately resource was putting people at risk.
But it sounds like they didn't take those allegations seriously, that women getting harassed, assaulted, raped, didn't really sort of register with the senior team.
I struggled to understand why they didn't respond immediately to that call for additional resource. I really struggle, and I still struggle with that.
And it wasn't only the actions of Oxfam staff abroad which was causing concern. The charity's stores in the UK take on volunteers as young as 14 years old. Some have alleged they've been abused. The 2013 to 2014 annual safeguarding report states that in 2012 to 13 there were 5 allegations specifically categorised as inappropriate conduct with children in trading. This figure was 7 in 2013 to 14. You're also disclosing today that young volunteers in Oxfam shops in the UK have, you're alleging, been abused. Can you tell us the case that most troubled you, the allegation that most troubled you?
Yeah. So there was one case of an adult volunteer assaulting a child volunteer that went to court. And that troubled me because I knew that Oxfam was not conducting the criminal record checks that it needed to conduct, that children were being left alone with adults who hadn't been criminal record checked. And that is something that afterwards I took to the Charity Commission, I took to the Children's Commissioner, I took to the Home Office. And at that time, the Home Office and the Charity Commission was saying that because it was retail, it was okay not to have those checks.
It's an extraordinary loophole, that.
Extraordinary. Oxfam and all the charity shops, people trust. They trust them because they're charities. And the point I made repeatedly, our parents are trusting these organisations to keep their children safe when they volunteer. These are 14-year-old children. And if parents knew that those adults were not checked, they would not be sending those children into those shops.
In your documents, you suggest that the shop manager put pressure on the young volunteer not to go to the police. What happened to that shop manager?
They were ultimately dismissed. My concern, though, was how did that happen? It shouldn't have been the case that the shop manager did that. There was a lot of learning from that case.
And how swiftly were they dismissed? I mean, did the senior team take on the seriousness of this particular case?
I think at the time I felt frustrated, and whilst they were dismissed, ultimately, it was, I felt it was challenging to get the right outcome.
Well, let's talk about the Charity Commission. You reported to them in 2015. What was their response?
When I went to them, I assumed they'd want to make contact with me. They didn't ask to meet with me. They didn't ask to speak with me. I had limited email exchanges. And I pushed and pushed and pushed, and they stopped replying to me. And to say I felt disappointed, just these are meant to be the people that you go to when, you know, in these circumstances. And I trusted them. And I just didn't understand why they didn't take action.
The Charity Commission did carry out an inquiry after some allegations appeared in the press in December last year. And that inquiry said, quote, many of the allegations were not substantiated. So they did do a thorough check at that point and found that a lot of it didn't stack up in their view. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so, you know, that is a matter for public record, that with any allegations, there will be some that are proven and some are not proven. And that wasn't the point that I took to them. My concern was the extent to which we were not adequately resourcing the safeguarding function and doing everything we could do to safeguard our beneficiaries and child volunteers. I think on that, the point is, in the press, there's been a lot of coverage about Oxfam and how shocking and surprising this is. It isn't. I went in 2015 to the Charity Commission. I went back again in 2017. Everything I'm saying today, the Charity Commission knew. So why is the government saying this is a surprise?
Do you think Oxfam can survive this?
I do. There are, behind Oxfam, thousands of committed, dedicated, incredible staff, absolutely. The things they do, they put their lives at risk every day. They are amazing people. In terms of the senior leadership team, I think there are some people there who need to look back, what's happened in the last few years, and think, did they do everything they needed to do to keep the beneficiaries safe?
Helen Evans talking to me earlier. Well, in a statement, the Charity Commission told us, we took the concerns Ms Evans raised very seriously and engaged with Oxfam on a formal regulatory basis to address them. The charity told us that its approach to safeguarding was improving, but the charity has not been sufficiently open with us about safeguarding incidents. She did not raise concerns about specific incidents with us at that time. We met Ms Evans in 2017 and we opened a formal regulatory compliance case with the charity, which has been ongoing. This including the issuing of a formal action plan to the charity. And this programme has discovered that Oxfam's current head of safeguarding has also stepped down, and the charity is advertising for an interim replacement. With me now is the organisation's chief executive, Mark Goldring, who met the government today. Mr Goldring, you will have heard Helen Evans there saying that she repeatedly raised her concerns with you, with your deputy, with the trustees, and she doesn't understand why she didn't get the response that she believes her allegations deserved. Can you explain that now?
I think Helen underestimates the impact that she actually had on Oxfam. So a few months after she left, she had been repeatedly requesting more resources. We appointed a very senior retired police superintendent to oversee our safeguarding work in the UK so that the kinds of incidents in shops were being properly investigated and indeed prevented. We also extended the criminal records check, the DBS check, not just to shop managers where we already had it and she'd introduced, but actually to the senior volunteers who were left in positions of supervision. We doubled the resources in that team and we've continued to extend them. Right. And we also extended the work in the last few months, again, because of the pressure of it. OK,
but why so late? She'd been making her concerns known to you and a number of other senior people in the organisation since 2012. She raised it, her maternity cover raised it in 2013. In 2014, she said, we need more resource and it isn't forthcoming. In the end, December 2014, she got one extra member of staff.
Well, the number has increased significantly since then, through 15 and 16. But also the other thing that Helen needs to take credit for herself is that the reason for the increase in number of cases was the establishment of a whistleblowing line, which she helped set up, and deliberate encouragement for people to come forward. Many of the incidents in shops actually were perpetrated by members of the public, not by Oxfam staff. But it's absolutely right that we report them and we take them seriously.
But why didn't you take her what she had? Sorry to interrupt, but why didn't you take her concerns seriously from the start? I mean, she tried to present her concerns to the senior leadership team and her contribution was cancelled an hour's notice. Why was that?
Well, the reason that her contribution was cancelled there was that the concern she was raising was specific to East and Central Africa. So I asked her to talk first to the programmes director to actually explore them and come back with us with some detail of how we could respond. Our leadership team is the broad-based team, and what this needed was really forensic examination and commitment to act. And we did act. So based on the concerns she raised and those horrible figures that she rightly described, we actually sent training teams to places like South Sudan to really drive home our expectations and the accountability that went with it, to make sure there was no uncertainty whatsoever about what was acceptable behaviour. We did not do well enough, and we have steadily increased resources since, and we continue to do that. But Helen started a lot of that work. We should have invested more resources earlier, but during 15, 16, 17, we've actually done that.
So do you apologise to Helen Evans tonight for failing to take her concerns seriously enough when she raised them starting from 2012?
I certainly apologise for not acting fast enough. I think we did take them seriously and we responded on many different fronts. The records checking was one of them, the training was another, the promotion of the helpline was another. She did some great great work. But what I recognise now, with the severity of issues as they've emerged, is that we should have resourced that team up faster, as we now have indeed done.
Do you also recognise that you should have been carrying out criminal record checks on staff working with young, vulnerable volunteers in UK charity shops?
We started a programme of first checking all the new managers. We extended it in 2015 to all previously serving managers, and then we carried on and extended it to all volunteers who are in supervisory positions.
So
that is in place. We have 23,000 volunteers, many of them themselves minors, and so we don't do checks. We do references, but we don't do records checks on every volunteer, but we do on every volunteer who's left in charge in a supervisory position.
Shouldn't you be checking all volunteers, though, who are working with young, vulnerable teenagers?
There are actually legal restrictions on who we can check on, but we have extended it to make sure that anybody who is likely to be left unsupervised with young people is checked.
If you've got your house in order now, why is the current head of safeguarding quitting?
Sure, she's taken a major new job in Europe, outside the UK. I also think the pressure of the system over the last few months with that public focus has been very intense. She's made her own decision. We would have liked her to stay. She's done the job for a number of years, and she's done it very well. It's not to do with levels of resourcing, I believe.
But you accept that she has felt under pressure in that role in recent months?
Yes, in recent months, and even over this last weekend, as there's been publicity, the number of reports coming in have increased. We've been proactive over many years in encouraging people to report and encouraging line managers to both drive the training and the compliance. That's put greater pressure on the safeguarding team, and that's why we've resourced it further, and we're committed to do so more. We were too slow to start scaling up in 2013, but we've done significantly since.
Given our allegations tonight and the fact that concerns were raised repeatedly with you yourself, shouldn't you be considering your position as well as your deputy who's quit?
Well, firstly, I wasn't in my position in 2011 when these events happened. I believe that my trustees and staff want me to stay in my post and actually lead the organisation through this. I saw amazing work being delivered by those very staff and volunteers that Helen describes. I also recognise that in Helen's written statement, she describes substantial progress being made in the last couple of years. But if our board turn around and say, actually, you're not the right person to lead forward, then I, of course, would resign immediately.